Yeah, that's all fixed at this point. Yeah.
And then I have to ask you this because I just know what a huge win this would be. I know I brought this up to David too, but I always, even to David, I've said, I see it more being facilitated by you guys. Is there a way to ever get like a daily cash out? We talked about this before.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I know that you were saying, but the problem is that each user has to dial that in. So, I mean, could they do it as a permanent? But I mean, we do know that every driver, if they didn't have to pay a fee or whatever, like you were mentioning earlier, the DoorDash direct card or Uber One, people don't like those. They just have them as a means to get their money cashed out that day.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's sort of like the golden ticket is solving that problem across all these apps.
Where it's like almost like, you know, I mean, just to put it real easy, like at midnight every night, all your apps would cash out.
Yeah, no, and actually David and I chatted about this maybe a year ago or so. Like, hey, could you just cash out all of your apps that are connected to your Para account or whatever? I mean, I think there's two things that we're watching. So one, apps like DoorDash and Uber, DoorDash in particular, but Uber to a lesser extent, Lyft to a lesser extent, they intentionally make it difficult for you to pay out to any card that is not their own debit card, right? And difficult meaning they charge you. DoorDash goes a step further. So DoorDash doesn't only charge you the most, they charge you $2 versus Uber's like 85 cents, for example. But DoorDash does one thing that I find pretty egregious, but they get away with it somehow. If you use Uber Pro and you decide to switch to Moves, that's like an instantaneous process. And like by tomorrow, your pay will come to Moves instead of going to Uber Pro. Or even like by, you know, your next cash out. So if you say, I just cashed out on Uber and I switched to Moves and I want to cash out this afternoon, you can get that money to Moves like this afternoon. DoorDash freezes your ability to cash out for 7 days if you switch off of the Dasher Direct card. And they make it super difficult to switch because obviously nobody wants to lose access to their money for 7 days. I think, frankly, these things are like borderline criminal. I think it's similar.
Yeah,
to,
I was gonna tell you about a lot of tales. I mean, there's one handle on YouTube. You're probably not familiar with it. I haven't talked about this in a while, but Uber Phoenix driver or something. He's in Phoenix. He had like an entire week's, and he makes a lot of his money on DoorDash. He had like an entire week's worth of pay, and he was just doing the weekly payout by them. And it happened that a restaurant was closed, and he was picking up some pings of orders from this place. And then he picked up one and said, nope, they're closed. And then he picked up another and said they're closed, and they deactivated him right there. They said, why are you sitting there just picking them up if you know they're closed? And he's like, why are you dispersing them if you know they're closed now? And so this whole thing happened. All of his money got frozen for like 3 weeks while they figured out the deactivation.
Wow.
For an entire week. So it was like $1,500. And he ended up getting it, but it was like a month later. In Colorado, if you're let go from a company or anything, you have the right to be paid that day.
Yeah.
Like if you get let go of a place, you can go into that business and get paid that day for everything you're owed.
Yeah. So Matt, what's the justification for the week? Or like it's fraud or something like that, or they don't even justify it, I guess.
I don't even need to justify it. It can't. I don't think there's any legitimate reason, because if it were a fraud reason, then this would be a universal rule across any debit card switching, any bank account switching, right? Like there's nothing unique about Dasher.
Yeah, or like if it's fraud, it'd be a day or two at most.
Yeah, right? at most. And we have two mechanisms, right? We have like you're switching your weekly payout, which is paid over a payment rail called ACH in the US. ACH changes will tend to take a day or two, and that's normal. And these pay cycles tend to be a week or two, so it's not the end of the world if it takes a day or two for that switch to happen. Meaning,
like debit's instantaneous. I mean, debit is
if you're switching your like instant pay, which is like the card on the number on the front of your card, then that's an instantaneous switch, and it's instantaneous in every other context that we do it. Uber, Lyft, Bank of America, Chase, Chime, you name it. If you switch to Moves from those cards, it's instant. DoorDash, 7 day freeze. So there's lots of reasons why this idea that you described, Steve, is like super appealing. But every one of these companies would have to get out of the way or proactively play ball. I mean, I think at some point it'll become obvious that what they're doing is not not fair to their users. Like the other one that always strikes me as really, really egregious is Walmart Spark requiring their users to bank with branch and not giving them a choice. And so we can't bank Spark drivers because they only can get deposits to the branch card, which I've never heard of an employer that requires you to use a specific bank account.
And if the only ones I know of are unions and stuff that use credit unions.
Yeah,
and then even then you can
work for a bank.
change
it might be reasonable to say you have to bank with the bank you work for,
right.
But
you shouldn't be able to force an independent contractor where they bank.
Yeah. So,
but I think it's the same thing, right? It's convenient. It's convenient for Walmart to only build it one way, right? So I think it goes back to the inherent tension.
And frankly, I just don't think that they've ever been scrutinized by either like a consumer protection regulator or had enough consumers complain, like users complain. It might be that it's a completely innocent mistake what Walmart Spark is doing, and they just haven't clued in that this is not good. I think what DoorDash is doing is pretty intentional. And so it makes it difficult to solve that problem you're describing, Steve, because like there are ways for us to enable that for free. The fee, this 85 cents that Uber charges, this $2 that DoorDash charges, that is DoorDash and Uber deciding to charge that fee. They don't need to charge that fee. We can enable that payment for near free. And like we would probably subsidize the cost to make it free because it's worth it for us to get that customer to get that deposit. But they choose to layer on a price to disincentivize you from not using Uber Pro, Lyft Direct, or DoorDash or Dasher Direct, right? So it's a very intentional choice that they're making that makes it difficult to solve that problem effectively.